heartbreak for multiple drivers, some underdogs shine, and absolute carnage at Albert Park. This is Into the Chicane, a Formula One podcast, post-Australian Grand Prix. We are your hosts. I'm Channing Apodaca. That is Brandon Wood.
Yo, welcome.
If we had to sum up this race in 3 words, I would go with holy fucking shit.
That's good.
This was absolute insanity. How did you feel about this?
It was definitely quite a shakeup from the past couple weeks.
Yes.
I think it all started from the practice sessions.
Yeah, going into this one, I've always thought that the Australian Grand Prix was a little bit lackluster. I've never thought that it was the most exciting race on the calendar. And then FP2 rolled along and showed us that we were going to be in for a little bit of a roller coaster. We got to jump right into this because there's so much to go over, and we're already trying to consolidate these podcasts into shorter, more concise, less rambling, which I'm doing right now. Just straight up information, predictions, opinions, stupidity, and then the Australian Grand Prix rolls around and gives us way too much to talk about. This could be a 3 or 4 episode if we wanted it to be. But pre-race, we were told that the grid boxes, after the first 2 rounds of the season, the grid boxes were going to be expanded because we had penalties in each of the Grand Prix for drivers lining up incorrectly. And they expanded the grid boxes. And who made out on the better end of that? The golden boy, Max Verstappen.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people questioning his and like kind of upset about it, but he was technically on the line, not past it by any amount, so he was still fully legal.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like we've talked about last week, people, the hashtag Red Bull cheats, F1 fixed is going to be trending but he was within the confines of the new rule that they released for this weekend specifically, where they expanded the grid box. Yada, yada. You guys can cry about it. FP1, I don't remember a whole lot happening.
It's a pretty normal session. The one thing that maybe was notable about it was that it was a little bit colder and windier than historically it's been in the past few years. So that was kind of throwing a little bit of a loop for some of the teams that's, just kind of figuring out what the tires are going to do for the weekend. I think that's the biggest question, I think, right now for all the teams, as much as like getting all of their aero stuff and the car worked out, some technical stuff. Yeah. They're all still trying to figure out the tires for this year. A
lot of teams having issues with DEG and tires getting hot enough, which I think we did see a couple. Max Verstappen struggled with that a little bit.
Well, yeah, specifically with this weekend, with the track having less wear on the tires as opposed to the last couple rounds. Some of the drivers were having a little trouble actually getting the tires up to temp, getting them in the window to really put in a fast time. So that's kind of what we saw. That's kind of where we saw. I mean, I think that was kind of like the deciding thing once we finally got to qualifying. That's a big reason why I think the Ferraris didn't qualify as well as they were able to, because they didn't quite have that strategy figured out. Mm-hmm. Both drivers were on different tire warm-up strategies, and that kind of
sounds like they're still using some of these sessions as testing sessions.
I mean,
they're doing different strategies with both drivers, but
I mean, just to back to the practice thing. I mean, they were also having issues on the track with GPS.
Yeah, so FP2 rained out. Let's just we'll get this out of the way. FP2 was rained out. It became no pun intended, a fucking wash basically. That's just kind of what happens. Especially, it's shitty for the teams because FP2 is the most important session of the weekend for practices, I guess I should say. That's where they're going to get most of their data, and then the rest of it is, FP3 is more just kind of putting the package together. But that's rained out and becomes a wash. FP3, we had a bunch of drivers just going off. That's where we started seeing, teams not getting their tires allocated, not getting their setups correct. And then that's when the GPS started glitching out, and we had just like traffic all over the place.
Yeah, cars ended up in a bunch of little groups where, people would be on a slow run at the same time. Some be on a hot run, and then everyone just getting frustrated with each other. And
I've never seen that issue happen. I've always been really impressed with the GPS and the computer monitoring that F1 and all the teams have in place, because some announcers might lose drivers on track, but they don't have all the information. But teams can tell you exactly where every single one of those drivers is, not just their driver, but they can tell you exactly down to the nano inch, whatever.
And that's part of the engineer's job in that circumstance
Yeah.
is to be able to tell the driver, that they have either people behind them or people in front of them, so that as they're going to making their runs, that they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff, and they can avoid, potential issues.
Yeah, so it messed with a lot of the team's practice sessions because they weren't able to get in the laps that they wanted to get any information from. Drivers weren't able to get proper warm-up or actual fast laps. They're having to start, slow down, get it up to pace, slow back down. The fucking GPS systems look like U.S. 911 response. You know what I mean? Just nobody knew where anybody was at.
Yeah. I think I just want to touch on this now because I think this was a good example this weekend. Is I think something that gets overlooked a lot is how often problems compound throughout the weekend, right? You look at Checo, like he had tons of issues in the practice session, and then ends up going off in his first run in qualifying.
Yeah.
Doesn't have something, and that ruins his whole weekend.
Yeah.
The Ferraris not being able to get their tires in the right window and stuff, and all those things just compound and build throughout the weekend and put people in the situations that they're in. It's
a real when it rains it pours type of sport, and then you see a ripple effect of the smallest little thing. You see that start to build. Like you'll see, we have the GPS problem here causing traffic, and then later on during the race, which we'll get to more, I made note of it. You have traffic after one of the restarts, which I've never seen. We'll touch on that more when we get there. I'll remember to get back to that. But into qualifying, surprising, Checo out in Q1. He goes off. I forget how many runs he had put in.
It was his very first hot lap.
Was it?
He maybe did like one warm-up lap, but it was his first like real push.
Yeah.
And then very early on in the lap, he went off like with the same issue.
He said locked up the front right?
I think it was both
fronts.
But he just said immediately on the radio, he was like, "Oh, same problem as before. Like we got it. What is going on? We got to figure this out."
Yeah, he bins it. He wasn't able to get it out of the rocks either. It looked like he was going to be able to pull it off. There's a little bit of runoff. It's muddy, but he touched the wall. Maybe he didn't have enough space to get it into that little bit of a runoff to get him out of the gravel trap, but he gets it stuck. And if you can't move your car out of a gravel trap, your session is over. So he's DNF'd in Q1, which means he's, without putting in any kind of a hot lap, he's starting from the back of the pack, which is detrimental to his bid for the championship. It's not over, obviously. Anything can happen. This is only race 3, but it put a big dent in it for him. He still does finish fine. I didn't like Christian Horner's comments after this. I don't know if you heard this.
I didn't really catch what he said. What did he?
So there was an interview with Christian Horner pre-race. It was just after the parade on the grid line when all the reporters are going out and interviewing people. Christian Horner was interviewed by, I want to say, Will Buxton about what he thought of Checo's chances of getting through the pack and where he thought he might end up. And I'm not upset about the fact that because he kind of was like, he'll hopefully be able to push through the pack. We don't know if it'll be as good of a charge as Max was able to do in the previous race, up to second or possibly first. And I'm not saying that I take issue with that, because I think Albert Park is more difficult to push through. It's a smaller track, less high speed. So Max was able to get through. We all knew that Max was going to get through because it's Max, it's the Red Bull, and the setup of Saudi just kind of favors a push like that.
Didn't Max start from 15th too, by the way?
Yeah, so he did have 5 extra spots. Checo starting all the way from the back. But Christian Horner said, we expect him to be able to push through the pack. He's a good little racer. And I just felt like, dude, a team like Red Bull, a team principal like Christian Horner, who already gets shit for the treatment of their second drivers, don't be calling a veteran of the sport, the second, a guy who's in second place in the world championship. Don't be disrespectful and say he's a good little racer. This isn't Oscar Piastri that we're talking about here. This isn't Logan Sargent. This isn't a rookie. I could understand if you were talking about Nick DeVries, somebody who haven't seen. It just came off as, when you want to believe that they're giving Checo all the respect in the world and they have his back fully, for Christian Horner to brush him off and say, oh, well, yeah, we've got a good little racer on our hands in our number 2 seat. It's just disappointing to hear that type of talk.
He needs to put some spec on his name.
He needs to put some fucking spec on Checo's name. Put some respect on his neck. We've seen how strong that thing is. So he starts from the back, and then Valtteri Bottas, I didn't see what penalty he took, but he also started from the pit lane.
I think it was just for some parts they took. I'm not sure exactly what it was. I know that they had a lot of suspension-related changes that they made coming into this weekend. I don't know that it was related to that necessarily, but they're definitely still searching.
Yeah,
they had
a bit of an ugly weekend overall. They lucked out because of everything that happened towards the end of this race, which we'll cover. But Alfa Romeo really was nowhere to be seen in a lot of these sessions. I think it was Crofty, or one of the guys I was listening to in the post-race interviews, and despite the fact that Valtteri Bottas is the new adopted son of Australia, they love him there. One of the guys was like,
seemingly more so than they like Oscar.
Yeah, you did see a lot of fans rooting for Oscar, but Valtteri Bottas was like the star of the weekend going into it. But one of the commentators, and I agree with him, was like, "Where has Valtteri been all weekend?" He goes, "I forgot he was even here. He was nowhere in practice. He was nowhere in qualifying, and I don't know if this is just because of the issues with his car, but in the race he was nowhere too. I think he might have had a little bit too much fun there. He was so. I don't want to say that he's so busy, but he was soaking up all the media attention.
A little distracted, maybe.
Living his life. And it made me wonder, and I'm not trying to start rumors or speculate, if he's mentally checked out.
I mean, I would, probably not so much. He's probably struggling a little bit with this year's car.
Maybe.
He's been outdone by Joe a couple times now.
Which that's why I really asked the question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, looking at it in isolation, this was his best finish of the year.
Joe?
Valtteri, but there's also 8 cars that didn't finish.
Yeah, 8 cars didn't finish the race.
So
he might have been pulling up the rear if it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to our notes page real quick. So that happens. And then, that little Max in Q2 avoided that. What kind of bird was that?
I don't even remember.
Is it a herring? It looks like a little tiny crane.
Yeah.
Or
some water bird.
What's that? A pheasant, I think it was. It looked like a little pheasant.
I don't know about that, but
look, hey, good on Max, because you can actually see him. He does juke to avoid the bird. The bird, on the other hand, didn't even flinch.
This just reminded me. I meant to look into this. There was somebody that I saw on Twitter. I don't know if this is a lie or what, but they said that Max had hit a bird during the race and he actually had front wing damage, and that was part of the reason why he wasn't as far gapped out front as possible. But I meant to look back and kind of look into that a little bit more, but I don't know. I don't know about that.
That would be interesting. I didn't hear Max talking about it
exactly.
At all.
I don't know. But
I feel like if that had actually happened, he would have said something. And I watched the post-race press conference. Didn't hear him say anything about that.
Yeah.
We'll see. Other than that, Mercedes nailed their tire strategy. 2 warm-up laps, and they landed in P2 and P3 to start the race. It looked like, in qualifying, that they were going to take it.
Yeah, I mean...
But you know what? To that whole bird story, Max barely out-qualified them. So if he really had that much pace without hitting a bird, I feel like he would have put it a second higher than the 2 Mercedes.
Also, he was on a different... Apparently, he did like 1 warm-up lap and then went for his actual quali lap. So
in Q3?
In Q3.
Interesting.
But brings me to the Ferrari thing, where Charles, for whatever reason, went for his lap straight out. Didn't even really give much of a warm-up lap. Carlos was on a 2-lap warm-up strategy. Carlos got a call late asking to give Charles a tow.
Mm-hmm.
And, Carlos was still on his warm-up lap, so obviously he's not going full out.
Yeah.
And I guess he just didn't quite get enough of a heads up so he can get up to speed or whatever and give a proper tow. Next thing you know, Charles comes around a corner and he comes up behind Carlos. Carlos is basically parked on the racing line and has to just get out of the way around him and then go on. And basically when Charles finished, there's a comment made over the radio where he sarcastically says, thanks a lot tell Carlos thanks a lot for the tow on that last one or whatever.
Oh God. I thought Carlos outshined him all weekend.
So that's what led to this. There's this moment in the paddock. I wanted to see if you could watch this with me and see what you think about this.
So we've got, looks like Chuck and Carlos coming together to have a conversation in the paddock.
All kinds of
technical
issues today. Let's see.
I was having trouble watching this. I was in Wisconsin performing on the night of the qualies, and I was driving through an actual fucking blizzard. It actually got a little shaky. We weren't able to go over 25 miles an hour. So I was watching this with very spotty reception.
So here's Carlos coming over.
Cut the tension with a knife. He's got his eyes deadlocked.
He's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
And Chuck looking really apologetic.
Carlos is like, what are you talking about? They didn't tell me. They didn't tell me ahead of time. So you can see already bubbling in qualifying, there's communication issues happening.
I wonder how much of the GPS issues might have played into that.
It might have, but it could have just been as simple as they weren't on the same page. They didn't talk about it ahead of time. Maybe they didn't go in with a clear this is what we're going to do and this is when it's going to happen. And I think that just kind of led to what we saw develop into the race,
And they both qualified 6-7, somewhere around there, right?
Something like that. Let's see. Pull it back up. Qualifying.
And go back up.
Yeah, 7.
Yeah, 7.
Carlos is in 5th.
5 and 7. Yeah, that was a surprise. I also thought it was a little bit of a surprise that Lance Stroll wasn't able to put in a little bit better time than.
For a second there, Charles was sitting in 3rd,
mm-hmm.
And I almost had my prediction. Absolutely correct. Almost
for a second, Alex Albon was in 2nd or 3rd.
Dude, that was amazing.
Yeah,
Alex. We can get into his whole thing later, but
yeah,
just overall, I was really proud of him.
So yeah, that's qualifying. We have Max taking pole. The two Mercedes having their best weekend, at least to start. They look like they were able to dial things in a little bit. That's good to see. Adding to the fight. That's pretty nice. Let's get into this race real quick.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, Bottas and Checo both start from the pit lane.
Mm-hmm.
Start of the race immediately. Mercedes get the jump on Max. I don't know what that was there, if it was just a tire thing with Max. Maybe he's just being cautious on the jump.
It looked like he got a bad start. It looked like the first little blip on the radar for Red Bull. Max didn't get a great start, and then he goes to defend to his right, I think it was, or he goes to defend to one of the sides, and George Russell just slides right in. And Max didn't really put up too much of a fight because George was just right in there, stuck a nose up the inside, takes over. And not only did he take over, but he took off. He jumped out way ahead because Max had to defend Lewis and then Fernando because they were jumping all over him too.
Yeah, Fernando's right there. Lewis, I think, did a good job when he was just sitting in that second place spot, just kind of defending, making the car as wide as possible.
And then Lewis ends up taking Max over too.
Mm-hmm.
So Lewis ends up in second, George in first, Max in third, followed by Fernando. I thought that before we get into that, let's go. Leclerc tries to pull off a risky move on Stroll.
Yeah,
first lap.
First lap, third turn.
Yep.
Like I said, compounding issues. You know, they started off on the back foot from qualifying. Charles trying to make an early move, being a little risky, trying to pass around on the outside. Didn't really have.
He tried to blame it on Stroll too. I don't know if you heard that. He goes, "Stroll hit my right rear." It was 100% his fault.
Yeah, he turned in on him. You know, it was just a little clumsy move from Charles, trying to get a little bit of a heads up early on in the race. I mean, as he should. You know, you want to make your moves quick, but it just really wasn't the place for it. And Stroll was just not in the.
Yeah, Stroll's lucky that it was just tire on tire, because that could have ruined his race too.
Oh my goodness, he had a couple lucky goes this weekend.
He really did, man. He was living like a cat in Australia. So that's the end of Charles Leclerc's race, and that is the first red flag. That's the first safety car. They didn't red flag it, right?
No.
Yeah. So
it wasn't until
preemptive right there.
Lap 7.
We have a safety car, and this safety car restart, if I remember, George was flying when they actually let things go. He was out there once the safety car came in. He got an early jump on it. He got it around the last turn.
Yeah, he's really good at that, playing with the safety car and being the first on the jump and doing it in a way where you can kind of throws off everybody else behind him.
He kind of slowed down the pack prior to the very last turn going into the starting line, and then took off around that turn, and bam, he was gone. Lewis then overtakes Max. I don't remember if that was before the safety car or not, honestly. But it ends up being
that was well before. Max was in third
at the safety car restart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, because
so it's George, then Lewis, and Lewis starts attacking George early, which means George starts crying early. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, because Lewis in second place spot, he's getting a lot of pressure from Max, so he's trying to just push the pace a little bit. George is like, well, you guys are telling me to manage my tires, but I'm
trying to defend from my teammate.
Exactly.
The George stands are going to start coming from us, because this is just another thing that I don't like from George. I get that you're being told to manage your tires, but then you start complaining about your teammate putting pressure on you. If you want to be the number one driver on this team, outdrive your teammate. Don't cry about the fact that your teammate is putting pressure on you and you have to defend from him. This is Lewis fucking Hamilton we're talking here. Like that's my grievance with George, for anybody. Also, for those of you guys coming at us about, hating on George, we're not hating on George because of a lack of talent. We fully understand that he's one of the prodigies of the sport and probably a top 5 driver in the world. It's about the fact that the team is still focusing on Lewis winning his 8th world championship, and great on George for driving the way that he's been driving, especially for this weekend, for making that a hard decision. It's not any hate on George about, having to sit pat and be a prairie dog to Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, people need to remember that, we're not hating on George, we're hating on everybody.
Yes. So. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so George having to defend from Lewis, which was an interesting little bit, because then Lewis gets on his radio and he starts talking about having to push the pace or let him go through. In the end, despite all George's efforts, it didn't work out so great for him. We'll cover that in a little bit.
So George was in the lead, pushing.
Mm-hmm. And he held it too.
Albon's spin out happens, lap 7, right?
Yeah. So let's talk first, before we talk about Alex Albon losing it, just what a great weekend he had going into this, and what fucking heartbreak this was. Mm. So Alex was in 6th place in the Williams on lap 7. 6th place in a Williams. He had gained 3 or 4 positions, right? Where did he qualify? He qualified 8th.
Yeah, so he was up 2 spots, so he moved off the jump.
Yeah. He moved up 2 spots, and yes, one of them was a DNF from Charles Leclerc, but still, he was having just...
He got past Stroll in that.
Yeah, he was having the weekend of his life. Not really, maybe that's an overstatement, but at least for the Williams. He was just really putting together... He looked great in practice. He looked great in qualifying.
The momentum has just been building.
Yeah, right? And especially comparatively to Logan Sargent, who I think was gripping the wheel a little bit too tight all weekend, because this was, there was a lot of shit going on for a rookie to be dealing with. But Alex having just a great weekend, he loses it. He goes just a little bit too hard on the throttle, in one of the turns on lap 7, loses it. He spins into the gravel trap. It shoots debris and rocks all over. He hits the wall. It takes out the Aramco wall. There's a little bit of controversy with this because people were saying that there wasn't enough damage to the wall to warrant a red flag, but there was a ton of debris on the track. I, for one, love the red flag. I think use the red flag as much as you can because we're not losing laps of the actual race. Mm-hmm. When you go under safety car, it's going to take those trackside marshals a bunch of time to clear off all that gravel, and there was a lot of it.
And with the safety car, they're only going to have a little bit of a gap in between cars to be able to do that, right?
Exactly.
And so in order of just making it easier on the marshals, safer, just overall, makes a ton of sense. Just
not only that, but I know it might take a little bit of extra time because the cars have to come in, drivers have to get out, or you can choose to stay in your car. But we're saving racing. We're not losing laps and fuel under safety car. We're actually getting more racing because of the red flag. We're putting a pause on the race and going, well, let's restart it. Some people might not like the fact that it's going to start from a different position or a different place with less momentum. You have a better chance of overtaking off the start line.
Reset.
Exactly.
All that kind of stuff,
I'm for that. That's more drama. That's more excitement. I would watch cars just do lap 1 50 times if they wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. Grid restarts are one of the most exciting parts of any race. Lap 1 and any kind of red flag restart is always fun. So I'm all for the red flag on this one. One thing I noticed that was crazy about Alex's crash is he goes into the wall, he spits out all those rocks. Gasly and Hulkenberg got a face full of debris. I don't know if you caught their onboards.
Not really.
Man, I forget who went through first. I want to say it was Gasly went through first. He got pelted. Wow. Very lucky that he didn't get hit in the finger or possibly in the neck or something. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, Roman Grosjean took a rock to the finger, right into the knuckle, and it almost broke his finger. He was barely able to finish the race. He wanted to pull himself off. But yeah, they got just absolutely sprayed. Lucky that neither one of them got damage, or at least that we know about. So we get the first red flag of this Grand Prix.
Very importantly, though, at first they called
safety car,
right?
Yeah.
And then that's when George jumps straight into the pits to go get his set of hards.
And this was his call. And
100%.
Had it only been a safety car, it probably would have been a great call, and George would have probably led the race by a lot because, like you said, he was the only car to come in. He pits for the hards, meaning he wants to go long on this set.
He was the first one to do so.
First to flinch. He comes in. When he comes out of the pit, he falls back into 7th. That's when the stewards decided to red flag it, which means that the grid order as it stands is going to stay the same way. So Lewis jumps
cars back
first,
into the pits, everything off the track.
So he loses 6 positions, and every car on the track is now able to get new tires because that's a new rule as of a few years ago that you're allowed to change tires under red flag. So George really bites. He takes the bullet there.
So effectively, he moved from first back to 7th for no reason.
Yeah. I thought that they made that call preemptively. I think that looking at the damage to the wall, looking at the amount of debris, they should have sat for at least one more lap and then made the decision whether or not to pit it. Because looking at it, you can go, this might be red flagged.
Yeah.
People might disagree, but I think looking at...
There was a possibility.
Yeah, I think there was a good possibility because of just how much was out on the track.
Yeah.
That it was going to be red flagged. And then, again, I stand by it. I think that was the right call to make.
Yeah, I mean...
Not George, but for the stewards to red flag it. But they should have waited just a smidge because it came out right after, that it was going to be red flag. The disappointment on that poor kid's face.
I mean, had it not been called red flag, he would have looked like a genius to everybody. So...
Yep, it's one way or the other.
It's the way the dice roll. Yeah, so
1/4 inch the other way, and you'd be celebrating. Mighty Ducks. But good on him too for he kind of takes it on the chin. I was expecting a full George Russell meltdown, but he was like, "No, not your fault."
He owned it up, owned it. So,
man, he would have really came out on the better side. That would have changed the entire race had that not been red flagged right there.
Potentially, I mean, he did have some other issues, but
the first restart, I don't know if you noticed that or if you remember the traffic on the formation
Yeah,
lap of
I
that.
think that was partially because of Lewis, right? Because he was in the front and he was going.
He slowed it down a lot.
Yeah.
When the traffic happened, it looked like it was Carlos and one of the alphas. I couldn't tell which one. I'm guessing it was probably Yuki. But they were coming around a bit of a blind turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much the GPS issues were playing into this, but nobody knew that there were cars slowed down right there. And we had like a 5 or 6 car near pileup.
Did you see K-Mag flying through there?
He went straight through the gravel trap. There were multiple cars that came flying through because there were cars dead stopped.
Yeah.
They were holding up the pack, and they do this, for anybody who doesn't know, they do this because they want to get a stretch of runway ahead of them where they can heat up their tires. They kind of do it in spurts. They'll get their engine hot, get their tires hot before they line up, and they want to take as much time as they can because they have to then wait for the rest of the pack to line up behind them, and they need to keep the heat in those tires. So they stretch out from each other as much as they can, but this just ended up being, again, compound of errors, traffic being one of those things. It was a joke, but I thought it was a fun joke. It led for just more and more hilarious drama.
Yeah.
And
then we hit at the restart. We had Hamilton in front and Max right there. We were
you texted me.
This. I was like, how many laps until Max gets him?
I said no more than 3. What did it end up being?
It was 3, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 3 on nose. Just needed to get his tires warmed up a little bit, and then they hit that. I would say like the 3rd DRS zone, going around that left-hander, and he just blew by.
I was texting with.
He did it really smartly though. Like he didn't try. He waited for the right moment.
Yeah.
He had kind of been right on his tail for maybe about a third of that lap. And
I was texting with Bruno Mastro, former guest of the show, friend of the show, whatever. And he was like, "Jesus Christ, that was just disgusting." That Red Bull DRS, like Max is really using it to his advantage right there. But he completely dusted him on that one. We had Checo climbing up the ladder a little bit.
He was making some beautiful passes.
And it's not like he was battling with, the best of the best, not to shit on anybody's name, but it was, the Haas's, the Williams, the Alphas, those back of the pack guys. But he was putting the move on at turn 9 over and over.
It's like every lap he was passing someone.
Yep, he was passing someone on the same turn. And it was, they were beautiful. They were fast and sticking the nose up the inside, braking perfectly. It was fucking lovely. So Christian Horner, you do have a pretty good little racer on your hands there.
I mean, shouts out to Carlos Sainz as well, because at this point in the race, he had already worked his way back up to 6th.
From where did he fall to?
He was at like 8th or 9th, something like that. But he was making passes.
Carlos was having a good race.
He was doing really good. It's as much as
this. I mean, the groans and sighs are preemptive of what's to come. You know what's funny? So I was leaving Minnesota. I was at MSP, Minnesota St. Paul Airport, and I was watching the post race, the press conference with Max, Lewis, and Alonso, and I had paused it, and I could still hear Crofty talking. I was at like one of the little charging station tables, and I still hear Crofty, and I look around, and there's a dude across from me looking down at his phone.
Watching the same thing.
Well, he was watching the race, and I go, hey, you watching the race? And he goes, oh, yeah. It was a British guy. And I turned my computer to him, and I was like, I'm watching the post. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have my headphones on. I didn't know that you could hear. And I was like, no, I've already seen it, dude. I've already seen it. And I was like, what lap are you on? And he's like, I think at that point he was on like 2. It was right after Chuck's crash. Yeah. And I was like, oh, man.
You're in for a wild ride.
That's what I kept telling him. I was like, I don't want to give too much away, but you're really in for it. And then I go, who's your driver? And he goes, George. And I went, oh, buddy.
Oh, man.
You're in for, and I kept trying not to give too much away, but.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, this poor guy. And then, slowly, as time went on, I kept being like, where are you at? What lap? And I think I left him on lap 14.
So just before.
So George had, he was still working his way up. I don't know. Had he made any passes? He had to have.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
He fell to 7th. He definitely chewed up some guys, maybe like Gasly and Stroll or somebody back there. Pierre Gasly, also great fucking weekend. We'll get to that later. George Russell, lap 18. Fighting his way back after having led this race. He's looking like he's going to make a charge at least to get himself back on the podium. Engine failure on lap 18. Flames just start shooting out the back of that Mercedes. You see him start dropping down the field order. He has to hop out and start giving the trackside marshals instructions on where to put fire extinguishers. And even if you're a guy like me who George Russell's not your favorite driver, you gotta feel for him on that one, man. After getting his podium taken away, having just a great weekend in the Mercedes, qualifying P2, finding the speed, being able to compete with Max, overtaking Max, leading the race, mucking the safety car pit, climbing back up, looking like he's going to get some great points, looking like he's going to get that podium.
All up in flames.
All up in literal flames, and the poor guy is just, shaking his head. You had that funny, you sent me that funny picture of him watching the Red Bulls at the other red flag restart, and he was just standing there staring in dismay. It looked like
he kind of had like a little bit of a cheeky
smile on his face. He had his
but
sunglasses on and everything.
He was definitely trolling by sitting there against the pit wall, just looking at the McLaren, or the Red Bull from about 6 feet away.
Yeah. So that was just a safety car, right?
Short, yeah, it was just a safety car. So at this point in the race, it was kind of a little bit of a lull for a while.
Yeah, it was a good race. There was a lot of really great racing.
Checo was still climbing.
He was climbing. Pierre Gasly was having himself a hell of a race. He was going back and forth with Carlos Sainz. Carlos had gotten around him eventually, but Pierre didn't give up. He stayed in his DRS, and there was multiple packs, in the middle and in the back of like 3 to 4 cars going at it over and over again. Little DRS trains, exchanging of places.
A lot of little battles. Yeah.
It was great, and this was a great show of speed for these cars. And that's something I want to talk about later, is what Albert Park did and how the new car regulations really affected this race. But man, we just got great looks of how fast these cars were. Again, I was talking to Bruno, and he was like, this should be the race that they show people to get them into F1. We got really great looks, especially at, I think it was like turn 3 and turn 9 where Checo was shining, of just how beautiful this track was and the show of speed that these cars have. Also, one thing that we got a great look at with all the safety car restarts and the safety cars, or the red flag restarts, safety cars and everything, we got a great look at the safety car start itself. They did this shot multiple times where when they brought the safety car out, they would go to like a long dead-on straightaway shot of when the safety car pulls out of pit lane and parks itself there and waits. And you don't normally see that because you're usually following the pack. Yeah. But they were doing these long extended shots of the safety car just chilling, waiting for the rest of the pack to come, and then it would start. I just thought that was funny because they showed that over and over again, and something we don't really get to see. It was kind of neat. So then we're getting towards the end of the race. Things have shuffled around a little bit. We've got a great showing from the Haas car. Nico Hülkenberg is keeping up. Both McLarens are having themselves the best weekend that they've had. A little bit in the back of the pack still, but they're looking good. K-Mag unknowingly hits the wall with just 2 laps left. His right rear tire scrubs the wall. The entire thing comes off.
Yeah, blows the tire off of the rim, and he's just, forced to end it right there. I forget where he was when he ended up going out, but he had a pretty good run going.
He was looking good. It was completely his fault, though. I forget who he was battling with at the time, but it looked like he might have gotten shoved, and no, he misjudged it, and he put that tire right up against the wall, and it ripped it right off. So he's limping back to the pits. And it was debris that caused the red flag, yeah? Mm-hmm. Just all the debris from his car
his tire.
Yeah, because it had sprayed. It was such a long distance, if it had been in just one portion of the track or one sector, but because he dragged it out so long and he was able to get it back to the pits, there was debris from that everywhere. So that causes a red flag with just 2 laps left.
Yeah, so now everyone's starting to really have the hair on the back of their neck stand up as they're all anticipating
Speaking of the Haas
showdown,
yeah. Before we get to this restart and everything that's about to happen, do you remember the battle between Nico and Lando?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was a great one. I mean, you have two of my favorite drivers. I don't even remember which lap it ended up being on, but Lando Norris and Nico battling it out, and Lando just edges him out, and Nico kind of gets forced wide, and he hits the dust. But man, that was a great little battle there. Let's get into this restart here.
Yeah. So at the restart, we had a showdown to the first turn, and Carlos Sainz.
Everybody saw this as an opportunity.
Everyone had the same thing.
Everybody had the same idea. I'm gonna dive bomb.
Yeah, they said, "Fuck it, let's send it."
Yeah, it was like when a school of fish shows up, and all the cranes dive down in. You get like a massive influx of all the birds just dive bombing down. It was every single car on the grid from 1 to 17 or however many cars we had left at this point, all just going into that corner.
Yeah, so
elbows out.
We saw Carlos Sainz turn in on Alonso. We saw Stroll go off.
Yep. Stroll went off into the gravel. So did Checo.
We had the two Alpines
up against the wall
with each other, taking both each other out.
Yeah. Pierre got hit by.
Did he get actually hit by somebody?
He got pushed in. And then
I thought he turned, like he moved over on him.
Maybe I thought he touched with somebody, or he might have been avoiding contact, but he ends up hitting Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, they both go like wedge each other into the wall.
Yeah,
Logan Sargent punted Nick DeVries off the track.
Yep, just fucking Charlie Brown style booted him.
Oh my goodness. So that was another 6 cars off.
Let's count it up. So
that's another 5 cars off.
We have no, not done yet. We have the 2 Alpines out. We have Logan Sargent out. We have Nick DeVries out. Who else?
Sargent, Magnussen, Russell, and Albon and Leclerc had already been out. So
yeah,
so just 4 cars in that one restart.
Yeah, and then on top of those cars, all the cars that went on top of the cars that DNF right there, who went out of the race permanently. We had all the cars that spun, got pushed off the track.
The Aston Martins both moved to the back of the pack.
Yeah, so Stroll goes off the road. Alonso gets spun out and has to follow all the way around. Comes from the back, and it's chaos. And they literally just immediately go, "All right, guys, let's do it over."
Yeah, like they red flag again. Yuki had moved up 8 places.
Yes, Yuki moved up to 5th. Nico Hulkenberg moved up to...
He's in 4th.
4th. And we had Carlos Sainz, because he caused the penalty, waiting to find out how much of a penalty he was going to get with only 2 laps left. So this is where I got absolutely giddy. There was a big controversy for the grid order, and I do not like this. I don't like the way that this shit went down. In F1, you have to get to the second safety car marker. All cars have to pass the second safety car marker for the current grid order to stand. Because they only made it to turn 1, they hadn't gone the enough distance for the grid order to stay how it was. Because like we said, we had it as Max Lewis, who was in 3rd, Alonso, and then we had Max, Lewis, Carlos, Nico, Yuki, top 5, who came out of that wreckage.
Yeah. Correct.
What they end up doing is reinstating the starting order from the previous start. So it goes Max, Lewis, Fernando,
Lance,
Sergio. Yes. Okay. This means that Carlos loses out on.
Well, Carlos would have been in 5th I think, and then he got a 10-second or 5-second penalty for the.
No, he would have been in third. He was in third at the time. After the wreckage, he came out in third. But
yeah, after the wreckage, but
yes.
previous to that, he had been in fifth,
right?
Which is why.
So he moves up, he gets, and he ends up, making contact. But they reinstate the grid order as it was, but he still has the penalty. So they're essentially saying that lap doesn't count, but the penalties incurred on that lap are going to count. So he goes from back into fifth to now all the way into the back of the pack because you lose 2 more cars on that one. So it's not even just the 5 seconds. And he only has one. There ends up being no time left because that burns off 1 lap. So we go from lap 56 to lap 58 right there because they go under safety car prior to the red flag, which I guess we'll just get into it. They end up finishing this car under red flag, which sounds weird. It's basically under safety car because they have to complete the last lap for anything to count.
Technically, they had like a short run where they could have made passes, but I think it was like on that last straight where you saw a couple guys making some pushes. It was
before they hit the sector, yeah. But I mean, they end up red flagging it, and it's lap 58. There's not enough leeway for them. They can't restart it and then have any more racing because they have to do a formation lap, or whatever you want to call that, and then that counts as lap 58. It's about fuel consumption. It's about just laps put in, and we end up finishing this one as is. But so Carlos ends up on the worst end of that stupid rule, and it's interesting because in Silverstone last year he benefited from that.
Mm-hmm.
He got overtaken by Max after a red flag restart, and because they hadn't passed the second marker. This was after the Guan Yu Zhou accident.
Mm-hmm.
Because they hadn't passed the second marker, the grid order was reinstated, and what ends up happening to Max is he caught a little bit of debris. His front wing gets damaged there. Carlos goes on to win his race by benefiting from that rule. In this one, he really got fucked.
Yeah. And I understand like the thought that you had where it's like, oh, well, technically that lap didn't count, so neither should his penalty. I would counter that with, well, let's think why do they give drivers penalties in those circumstances to begin with?
For reckless driving, as a punishment to prevent them from doing something stupid in the future.
Yeah. So, even though there wasn't, wasn't really like a disadvantage given to the Alonso, right? Yeah. From that accident, it still makes sense to me why they would want to penalize Carlos just to reinforce, that they
safety regulations.
Exactly.
I would counter that with then penalize his super license, give him penalty points on his license. But if you're gonna make that lap null and void, make that lap null and void.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had other drivers who, were like Lance Stroll, for instance, Sergio Perez. They benefited from it. Stroll went off.
Logan Sargent ran into Nick DeVries and ended his race.
Yeah.
He didn't get a penalty.
They went off. All these other guys went off, and they made out fine because of it. They actually, Lance Stroll, Sergio Perez, they should have lost a bunch of spots. But because of the ruling, and this isn't even like, this could be labeled as their fault. You know what I mean? They went too hard in, late braked it, missed the turn, and go off into the gravel. They benefit from making these giant mistakes, and because of this rule.
Yeah.
Carlos Sainz is literally kicking freaking rocks.
Yeah. I know Haas protested this. Their claim was the cars did make it to the second line, and they were trying to preserve Hulk's spot that he had worked up, but it didn't work out. They decided.
That's where the only way I would have been happy with, had they restarted this race with Carlos in third and he gets this 5-second penalty, that would have put Nico Hülkenberg in third, getting his first podium of his entire career. That would have been the only saving grace for anything happening from that. So
I saw a stat. Where is he? He's tied for third all-time races without a win.
Shit, not even a win, a podium. Nick Heidfeld, huh? In second.
183 races without a win for Nico.
And it's not for any fault of his own. I guess that's not true. He's got to bear the brunt of a little bit.
A little bit, but
he hasn't been in a competitive car. He's always been in the midfield. Nobody's really given him a shot.
But he deserves some recognition for still hanging it out and putting up great times.
Absolutely.
Really,
I think he's going to get it. That will be a bold prediction of mine on this season. I think he's going to get one.
A podium.
We need something crazy like this to happen again so that Nico can get that. But I have an issue with that safety car line rule. I don't think it should be there. It should have, every driver made the decision to do that. Fernando, Lance, Sergio, they were all involved in this. They're all partially to blame in a way, and that's just racing. Just because they didn't cross X amount of space doesn't mean...
here's the thing. FIA put out a statement afterwards. They doubled down on their decision. They said based on all of their info, they're going down looking at data. They're looking at who's turning when, who's pushing the gas, who's pushing the brake when. And they decided that Carlos still deserved that penalty. So
the penalty, fine. If they want to give him a penalty, whatever, give him a penalty. But what we're saying is that a certain stretch of the road doesn't matter. A certain stretch of the track, any move that you make, your start doesn't matter because if it gets red flagged right off the line, if you get a great start and you make a great move, then that doesn't matter. That everything basically prior to turn one doesn't matter. If you overtake somebody, you should reap the rewards of that. If you make the mistake, you should bear the brunt of that. If you get into an accident, you should have to deal with that.
Yeah, well,
I don't like the fucking rule. End of story.
I'm kind of confused as what it is you're really talking about. But
what do you mean?
I'm confused. What are you trying to say?
Well, they're saying that all cars have to pass that second safety car line.
Yeah.
When the last car passes that second safety car line, that means that everybody ahead of that car has already done so much. They've already put in X amount of work. And if you've made moves in that amount of time that the last car crosses, if it gets red flagged, everything that you've done, accomplished, or lost out on is now doesn't matter.
Yeah, and?
That's a bad rule.
What should they have done instead?
Because now it's all for nothing.
Just set that same...
They should take it from however the accident plays out, however the grid lines up at the end of that. If Fernando Alonso's in the back and Carlos is in third, then it should be that way. And if Carlos has to take a penalty for causing that accident, then fine. Then he has to take that penalty. But Carlos takes the penalty and they reset the grid. So now he's double fucked.
Yeah.
And now Nico and Yuki...
Yeah.
Who were the ones who were able to stay out of trouble, don't benefit from that.
Yeah.
I think that's trash. Just because the cars in the back didn't pass a line, they're half a mile down the road from that last car.
Yeah, well...
I think it's a bad rule.
Maybe FIA will hear this and they'll think twice about it.
I think they're going to... I do think that they're going to take a look at that rule and we will see a change because it's really controversial.
Yeah, I'm going to DM... this clip to headquarters and see what they say.
Other than that, so the race ends up being Max Verstappen first, Lewis Hamilton in second, good on him, and Fernando Alonso in third, with Carlos Sainz taking a massive penalty, bringing it all the way up the rear, which is why he was so pissed off in that video that we saw with him and Chuck Leclerc earlier. Man, I wish I had made a prediction for 3 teams on the podium for this one. This was a crazy one, though. This one, I think, will go down in the history books as one of the wilder races we've ever seen. I don't think we've had this few cars finish since almost U.S. Grand Prix, what was it?
Yeah.
Whatever, when only 7 or 8 cars finished.
We had,
12.
8 teams in the top 10?
Yeah, beautiful. And only
1, 2, 3, 4... Oh, wait, no. 1, 2, 3... 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the top 10.
Yeah, and only 12 cars finished. Interesting one. Crazy.
Can I just say, I haven't seen Lewis this happy in a long time.
Yeah.
Him being in second it was pretty funny because after the race, he's like, Where's my team? There was nobody from the Mercedes team that was there.
Really? I didn't see that.
I think that was because at the end of the race, the crowd stormed the track, and I think the Mercedes team just like
tried to avoid it.
That, or they went straight to the garage and tried to like protect everything. They didn't want like people getting into their stuff or anything. So maybe that was why, but there's nobody there was like a couple people from the Mercedes team there.
I didn't even notice the crowd getting stormed. I was in Minnesota. I was back in Minnesota by that point, and so it was, with all the red flags and restarts, it was like 2, almost 3 in the morning at this time I was watching.
You know how they'll do the little press releases. They'll be like, so and so was called to the stewards after the race. Apparently, the promoters from the Australian GP got called to the stewards.
Albert Park
over that.
Oh wow.
Because that's a real serious issue, and I know that like
it was that bad, huh? Yeah. I mean, I've stormed the track before, in Austin, but nothing dangerous. I didn't feel like it was.
Yeah, it was like the ending of a national basketball championship game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that. The end of this race reminded me of. Did you watch the Daytona 500 this year?
A little bit of it, yeah.
How many restarts we have, and
I was watching because of Pastrana.
Yeah,
and when I had heard that he had finished, was it 13th or 12th? I was like, man, that's amazing. And then
he was up there for a second.
Yeah, he was leading the race for a second, but then you realized that 60% of the field didn't finish the race.
Yeah, I mean, also when NASCAR was at COTA just a few weeks ago, it was the longest 4 laps I've ever seen in any sort of racing, and I guess I don't watch a whole lot of NASCAR, but apparently that's par for the course. So this race was akin to NASCAR. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll just leave it right there. That was interesting. Good for Lewis. On top of that, I thought that this was a great race for McLaren and Haas. They both showed signs of life. They're two teams that we've, especially McLaren, been a little hard on this season. And Haas kind of the opposite. We've been really boosting them. But they both look good.
Yeah, so some of the data... McLaren's were looking pretty good. It's the race pace. They were not too far behind the Alpines.
Yeah. Also, the Alpines had a great. They were really putting up a fight. Pierre in particular, he was up there for a lot of the race. Man, so like I said at the beginning, heartbreak for numerous drivers. He's one of them.
Yeah, they're kind of. I feel like they're going to be setting the pace for the midfield for the rest of the season.
Yeah, they're sitting 5th now after this race, right? I think McLaren actually jumped up to 4th.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can really, just because of today and everything, I don't think you can really hold the constructors' points as any sort of...
Right, well, I'm saying I think they're going to end up in 4th. They've shown a lot of really good speed, and this weekend proved that. Like I said earlier, Pierre Gasly, he might have lost out on a position to Carlos, but he was right on his ass. He was in his DRS zone for a lot of it. He didn't give up on that spot. So heartbreak for them, heartbreak for fucking half the people on the grid. Let's see, what else do we have? I thought, so they made changes to Albert Park. They got rid of one of the chicanes, right, prior to this race?
I feel like it was a couple of years ago that they did that.
It wasn't just this year?
I don't think so.
Either way, it looked great. When you get rid of a chicane like that, you're able to carry more speed into that corner without having to slow down. And like we talked about, the speed that you were able to see in Albert Park just looked phenomenal.
Yeah, and one of the biggest differences between last year and this year was, I think, that last year they had the 4 DRS zones in the practice, and then they ended up nixing one in qualifying and the race. So they left all 4 of them in this weekend, and I think that helped, keep it a little bit more together.
Yeah. I don't know how you feel about this, but we've had a few races this season. We've had 2 other races, and it looked like it was a real runaway, obviously for Red Bull, and they had a couple. We saw the first chinks in their armor this weekend with just human error, potentially a bird error for Max. I don't know, but last season when we got the new car regulations, most teams were having to deal with porpoising for the majority of the season, so we didn't get to reap the fruits of the labor of the new car regulations. And I thought this year, with porpoising being almost all but nixed, and Albert Park looking phenomenal with the new changes that they've made to it, This was the first time I think that we've truly gotten to see the fruits of the labor of the new car regulations, because the pack was able to stay tight. They were all able to hold pace. We were able to see teams getting in that clean air, like Pierre Gasly, being able to keep up with each other, and it just made for super exciting race for every team at every different level. Like I said, the McLaren and the Haas being able to battle with each other. Everybody in their own sort of class of the field was able to keep pace with each other without anybody running away.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see at this race more than any of the past couple that the field is really split as far as like team wise.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't just seeing like one team here, one team here, one
Sure.
team. You were seeing, the top 10 was like 8 to 7 different teams for most of the race. So it was cool to see that split and to see, it coming down to more just like driver and more in circumstance and less about like.
We got to see a lot of that, particularly I think with the Williams team. Alex Albon was really putting his name in the hat to show things. But new regulations just really showing up here at Albert Park. Like I said before, I had never seen this as one of the more exciting races, and holy shit, was this a good one. I think we had talked about doing this. I think pretty soon here we're going to have we're going to start doing a ranking for race of the year, and we're going to move the dial as we go along. We'll figure that out, and we'll get that to you guys.
So far, has this been your favorite then?
I think this has been my favorite of the year.
It's been the most exciting. It was crazy to see that last, hour, half hour of the race be as chaotic as it was. But
we're only 3 races in, but man, it's getting more and more exciting as we go along. Let's get into now our bold prediction reviews and fantasy reviews, and then we'll wrap this bitch up.
Cool. So, starting off with the bold predictions, one of mine was Charles top 3 in qualifying. Almost happened, didn't happen.
Close.
Charles top 5 in the race, obviously didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
Russell finishes ahead of Hamilton, definitely didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Man, you were close with that one too.
I was close with a lot of these. Hülkenberg top 10. That's
where did he finish?
He got top 10. He
got points. Yet
7.
He finished 7th.
Yeah, so that's one for me.
Also, was this Oscar's first points?
Yeah.
Yeah, at his home race. Good on him.
Yeah.
You know what I noticed? We have every single team has a point so far this season.
Yeah, and I think that's the first time
in a few years.
Yeah, so.
And almost every single driver has points themselves, save for little Yankee Doodle Dandy. So
one day.
Let's finish out your bold piece.
So, and then we got Albon top 10. It was close. He was doing well. Stroll top 5. Let's go. That's 2 points.
You got a point there?
Yeah.
Wait, 2 points total or 2 points?
So, yeah.
You got a point for Hulk. Wow.
And 1 for Stroll.
So that gives you 3 total on the season, right?
I guess so. I haven't been.
Yeah, because you had 1 point last time. You got 2 points on this one.
Okay.
Wait, what was your last prediction?
Stroll top 5.
Stroll in top 5, so you have 4 points total.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you got 3 points this week.
No, 2 points this week.
No, you got Nico top 10.
Yeah.
What was your other one?
Stroll
top 10.
Top 5.
Top 5. Oh, so 3 points total.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to mine.
Are you drunk?
No. I'm flabbergasted that I'm losing.
Yeah.
Bring up their notes page real quick so I can see all the way at the bottom.
Okay.
All right. So my prediction was McLaren would finish last. Did not happen. I also had Alex Albon in the points. Did not happen. I had a Red Bull will finish 30 seconds above the second place finisher. Absolute carnage. Obviously did not happen. This one I can't believe didn't happen. I had that somebody would do a shoey. This one will remain to be seen. I didn't see one. You say you didn't see one, right? If somebody out there listening to this can go to the broadcast and show me a shoey on the podium, it could have been an engineer. It could have been the mayor of Melbourne or wherever they're at. Somebody on that podium doing a shoey. Let me know. The next one, I missed out big. Like I said before, I thought this was going to be a boring race. I said 1 or fewer safety cars. I missed that one by a long shot. And this one really sucks. I had George making contact. As far as I know, George didn't touch with anybody, yet still didn't finish the race. I should have just had George DNF. So it's 3-0 on the season. You're winning that one. I need to have a big comeback here in the next few weeks.
Well, I mean, you are winning in fantasy, so.
Which was what really matters. Let's get to our fantasy update. So the ITC Official Fantasy League. We have myself, Incident, in first with 925. Brandon, Porpoise Power. Oh, you changed your name, Porpoise Powertrains. You're not Porpoise Power 2 anymore.
Yeah, we got a new engine program happening this year, so.
Congratulations. Yeah. You are in second with 896. I'm slowly building a smaller gap ahead of you because it started out as like 5, and then it was 20, and now we're up to...
No, I feel like I think it's shrinking. You had
29.
like 30 points on me.
I think I had less than that. We were only 20 or 25.
I'm pretty sure it was more. I'm pretty sure I'm closing it, but
I don't know. I disagree. Susie Wolf Stan account, big leap all the way up into third. J Money drops down into fourth. Yeah, Susie Wolf Stan account, big leap. Good on him. J Money drops down to fourth. Strolling with My Homies drops down to fifth. Church of Checos remains stagnant in sixth. Let's Go Full Throttle, big fall off a cliff. And KJ still bringing up the rear. Pick it up, buddy.
So just this weekend,
I made out like a bandit. You know, I got so lucky. As far as as upset as I am about that safety car second line rule, that saved my fantasy.
Yes, I don't know what you're complaining about. So,
for the betterment of the sport, it's not all about me. Some of us aren't looking at just ourselves. But that is it. This has been Into the Chicane post-Australian Grand Prix edition. We'll be back next week with news and notes. We're 3 weeks away, almost a month away, from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix.
Almost there.
We'll see you guys then. Peace.
Peace.